Hi, and welcome to Z Games. Recorded live at 4ZZZ Studios in Brisbane and broadcast nationally over the Community Radio Network, Z Games brings you the latest gaming news, reviews and interviews from across Australia and around the world.
Hello, you are now listening to Z Games, Australia's favourite and longest running gaming radio program, coming at you live on 4ZZZ 102.1 FM. You might be listening on Z Digital or around the country thanks to the Community Radio Network. I am Razor, and joining me is Lee.
Hello.
And Evie.
What's up?
And we also have special guest Scott Beebe.
Thanks for having me back.
Not a problem. Scott, you'll be telling us about the local happenings in the new Brisbane Byte section, which we'll talk about later.
I'm looking forward to it.
As well as that, coming up on the show, I'll be reviewing Detroit Being Human, an interactive video game.
Good.
Is that what they're called?
Well, I was reaching for another word. It's more like an interactive story experience.
Also known as a video game.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get into more detail later when I found my proper adjectives. But first, the week in gaming news headlines. Lee, what do we have?
An Australian Senate inquiry into the practice of in-game loot boxes is underway, with a report due in September. The inquiry is tasked with determining whether the practice of offering randomly selected digital items is gambling and the adequacy of current consumer protection legislation. The matter is open for public submissions to be sent to the committee secretary at Parliament House. Loot boxes have been a controversial topic in the world of gaming lately, with EA Games in particular having been singled out for their intrusive chance-based progression system in Star Wars Battlefront 2.
What do you think about that?
I think it definitely does have gambling elements to it. I mean, loot boxes are extremely addictive.
Yep.
And I as one that is a victim to the loot box cycle, I've spent probably,
Go on, give it a number.
maybe 3-4 digits varying.
Four digits?
Yeah,
Four?
probably.
Wow.
4 digits.
Over the course of maybe
2 weeks.
No, I don't earn enough for that. I'm going to say like 4 years.
Right, okay.
Yeah, 4 or 5 years that I've been really
Okay.
gaming. Yeah, no, I've spent a lot of money.
What game is this spread across?
Not exclusively one game.
Yeah, okay. Good.
But most recent times probably Overwatch.
Right. Okay.
I'm just so obsessed with the characters, and then you get these loot boxes and the sounds they make too. Which every time I open loot boxes, the sounds are actually very, very similar to gambling machines.
Evie, do I need to take your credit card away?
No. I actually only put spare money in. It's sort of like I don't actively go, I'm going to throw $100 at this.
So it's not ruining your life.
No. It's just like, I've got a bit that I can throw into like my Battle.net account, so I'm going to put like $30 in there, and then.
Just think, if you had $1,000, think how nice a hat you could buy for yourself. Huh?
I could buy some really fancy Crocs.
Yeah.
The creators of PUBG have dropped their lawsuit against Fortnite developer Epic Games. PUBG Corp officially withdrew the lawsuit, which alleged that Fortnite had replicated the fundamental gameplay experience of PUBG. PUBG Corp is yet to issue a statement outlining the reasons for their withdrawal.
That was a weird lawsuit to begin with.
Yes. Although I think it did have some merit.
Oh, sure, yes.
Yeah. A big sort of thing that they outlined was that the frying pan was, a trademark or something.
I haven't played either of these games, so I don't really know what's going on with that.
Well,
There
okay.
are loot boxes, so watch out.
Oh gosh, no.
A valuable inclusion there in this news article, Evie. It wasn't on one because a lot of gameplay elements you can't just trademark. So if you infringe on that design, there's not really anything you can do. But in this case, it was a weird one because PUBG uses the Unreal Engine. Unreal are also the makers of Fortnite, so there was some feeling that they were able to potentially have grabbed some of their assets or code or something and implemented that into Fortnite, which I don't think is really how it went down, but the optics there weren't great. I was kind of expecting that this would be settled out of court, but this is like literally just dropped and everyone's walking away happily. Is that the case?
I'm not sure who's happy and who's not. I assume Epic Games is probably happy because they, don't have to go to court and defend themselves over this.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to what led them to do it. If there was a specific piece of advice they got from their lawyers, or whether they were garnering too much ill will from the public. Although that hasn't really, stopped these corporations from suing each other in the past.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just wondering why. Or if there was some sort of agreement behind the scenes out of court.
Yeah, I guess like when it started, PUBG was still the bigger game, and now Fortnite is like 10 times the size of PUBG. So maybe like when they initiated this fight, they felt like they had a chance. But now, like in that time, Epic and Unreal have become even more of a gargantuan beast.
And it's only been the last 6 to 8 months that that Fortnite has sort of superseded PUBG as the go-to battle royale game.
Yeah.
Definitely at the end of last year they were on equal footing or around, in a sort of area where they could compete against each other. But now it's just Fortnite has just taken all of the players, all of the money.
I found it a really interesting lawsuit too because Tencent have a stake in both companies.
Oh, yeah.
So Tencent was suing themselves and then withdrew the lawsuit from themselves.
Yeah.
So thank you, Tencent.
Yeah, well, I think they own 10%, funnily enough, of both companies.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they don't have really an interest in suing themselves. But
It could make for some interesting boardroom calls, though.
Yeah.
We Happy Few, a game originally banned in Australia for its depiction of mind-altering drugs, will be released here after all. The classification code does not permit games that incentivize drug use. The game will be released without modification, with a R18 plus rating and an advertisement for fantasy violence and interactive drug use. The game will officially launch in August.
This is really cool. Firstly, it shows that the classification board is kind of open to wiggle room there. They did open public submissions on this, like last month. And so it seems like there has been a back and forth between, the gaming people and the classification board people, and they've just let this game go through unchanged, which is really kind of remarkable. In the past, we've seen this happen, and games have had to be modified to sort of submit to the classification board.
Yeah, I think this
code.
is the first time that I've seen it, that I can recall it, like, going through again a second time without any change, particularly after, aiming for an R rating. So it's remarkable. It's amazing that they've actually reached a stage where they're willing to do that, though, I think more than anything.
It makes you wonder what changed, though. Why approve it now and not before? Is it just public outcry? Does it have that much power?
Yeah, it's hard to say.
It feels like the initial call didn't seem like it was really based on the context in which it was being presented. And I guess the submissions process allowed them to reconsider that and realize that, given the actual context in which you interact with the drugs in game, it's not exactly like it's an endorsement or anything, right?
Yeah, because it's not black or white, whereas the classification code seems to be. They just have a clause where they say no games can be released that incentivize drug use. So like if you're a soldier in a game, for example, and you pick up like a stimulant and you stick it in your leg and take the drug, and then all of a sudden you're better, like that's not permitted.
Yeah.
Under the current legislation.
Certainly not if it's called morphine.
Yeah. I think it's the fact that it was, there were real life drugs being depicted that was problematic in some of the games, like Fallout 4. But here it seems like, like Lee said, the context has been taken on board. Like within the game, you can take a mind-altering substance, and that changes your gameplay experience. And it's supposed to be like a commentary on like mind control for the government or something like that. So it's not just like drugs are good. There's a kind of a more subtle, more nuanced point that the game makers are making, and it's
that drugs are bad.
Drugs are bad. Yeah.
I think
that's pretty much it.
I think it's fair to say though that if you're going to have like extremely violent, graphic games, but you're not gonna, and even sexual content in video games like Grand Theft Auto and stuff like that, but then you're not gonna have, we'll draw the line at drugs. If you're gonna have hacking people up and so on, but you're not gonna have that. I don't know. If you're gonna have a few bad things, you can't. Do you know what I mean? You can't regulate that.
Yeah.
How do you justify going, well, you've got kids buying games, or you've got, people of 17 buying quite violent video games, but you're not letting them... They're all the same thing. They all fall under a category of they're going to create some kind of response from people, parents especially, or so on,
Yeah, but the state can use violence, whereas it can't... There's no value in encouraging people to experience drugs, whereas... But that's a discussion for another day.
That's a different show.
Yeah.
We're about to kick off a brand new monthly segment called Brisbane Byte. And to present the segment, we've called in the editor, creator, writer, and all-round maker of the Brisbane Byte magazine, which you may have seen around the place. At various venues around Brisbane. Scott, you've been doing this for a number of months now. It's a little magazine that sort of outlines various happenings, news, and updates about things that are going on in the local game scene and industry.
Yeah, there's way more happening in Brisbane than you ever think about. So it's worth coming on here and letting everyone know.
So, yeah, what is going to happen is at the start of every month, Scott's going to come on and tell us about the local stuff, the real local
ground
stuff. Yeah, getting right in there with the local scene.
Mixing it up.
So what have we got happening this week, Scott?
The Brisbane Retro Gaming Markets are happening again, this time at One Up Arcade in Morningside. If you've been to one of these before, then you know about the literal gajillion games, consoles, collectibles they have for sale. I think there's something like 10,000 items in total, which is a hell of a lot. So if you're looking for GoldenEye on 64 or Streets of Rage on Mega Drive, you can head over there and actually pay an affordable price. So mark Sunday, August 19th, between 9 and 2 down on your calendar at One Up Arcade in Morningside. Have you guys been to one of these before?
Have not.
No?
Yeah, I don't actually have a working retro console, unfortunately. Maybe I could get one there.
Yes, they have stacks of them. They have pictures and all sorts of stuff.
They don't make them like they used to. You can find working Super Nintendos all over the place.
Yeah.
But finding like a working Xbox OG is like totally impossible.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of One Up Arcade, they have a promotion they run where they pick a random arcade cabinet and they set a high score, offer $40 to anyone who can beat it. And right now it is Shadow Warriors, also known as Ninja Gaiden, and it's jackpotted for 20 weeks in a row. And now, if you beat the high score, which is not the highest score in the world by any means, you can win $800.
$800?
$800.
For being good at Ninja Gaiden.
So what are you doing after the show, Ray?
Being bad at Ninja Gaiden.
Yeah, I will continue to be the worst at Ninja Gaiden. Yeah.
A couple of bits of sad news. Friends of the show, I believe you've had Alex and Nathan from Fluffy Knuckle Duster on here before.
Yes.
Have you spoken about this?
No, we didn't kill them. No.
Okay.
They're still alive.
They're still alive. They've just split up, unfortunately. They've made a lot of mobile games such as Bouncing Brendan and Drunken Heroes. Alex will continue to develop games here in Brisbane, and Nathan has just left him and just flown over to Canada. Decided to mix it up with the big boys. So we wish him luck.
Yeah, good luck. We had those guys on the show like a few times, maybe 3 times, and they were always so keen, so enthusiastic.
Yep.
And they were hard workers.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll take that enthusiasm to whatever they're doing next.
Yeah, I hope so.
The other sad news comes out of Pincadia in Wollongabba. Just 7 months after they opened, the Pinball Arcade has unfortunately had to close its doors due to a kitchen fire. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but all the staff had to be let go while everything is being organised through the insurance companies. The owners are hoping to reopen at some point in the future, although it is unknown when that might be.
That is devastating news. That was a really cool place. I hope it comes back in fine form.
Yeah.
And there are 3 games that I wanted to bring to your attention that are coming out either right now or this month. The first is Eyes of Ara from 100 Stones Interactive. This is the mobile port of the PC game that came out a couple of years ago. Won a bunch of awards. It's a interactive puzzle game. If you've ever played Agent A on mobile, I liken it to that a lot. It's just got really impressive graphics though, so worth checking out. Comes out July 13th on iOS for $8. Next we have Super Starfish coming out from Protostar. This is an incredibly beautiful game. Simple mechanics. This is the studio that did Sling Kong, if you've ever played that. It's been downloaded something like 10 million times.
Righto.
So these guys have some experience.
Okay.
Super addictive games.
And I describe this game as utterly gorgeous liquid neon, which I don't think there's any better way to describe it.
No, it's great.
And that one comes out at the end of the month, July 27th, on iOS and Android, completely free of charge, with some easy-to-avoid microtransactions. And lastly, we have Super Dropland coming out of SQ Hub, the Screen Queensland co-working space over in Tenerife. One of the ex-Halfbrick developers has been working on this one solo, and it's just a cute and casual puzzle game. Has ghosts and all sorts of stuff.
It looks so cute.
Worth checking out. It's available on iOS right now for free.
Very cool. Okay. Thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you.
That's great. And Brisbane Byte is available in magazine form around the place at various game-related venues, but there's also an online version.
Yep. If you can pick it up at venues around the city, such as Netherworld or various universities, pinball places, arcade places, whatever. But if you want to know more about the local gaming news coming out of Brisbane, you can subscribe to Brisbane Byte magazine for free at bit.ly/BrisByteSub. That's bit.ly/BrisByteSub, Byte with a Y.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Again, Scott Beebe from Brisbane Byte. You're listening to Z Games.
Now we're going to listen to Ray. You're going to do a review for us.
Yes, I've been playing Detroit Become Human, which is a PS4 exclusive. Basically, it's an interactive story about robots.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Interactive story. I like
Yes, I've settled on that description. But it's very cinematic. And I have to say that the graphics, the visuals in this game are real tight. Like, yeah. Like, I mean...
You're making it sound real gangster when you say that.
Yeah, it's
Real
diggity dope, you know. No, it is like, it's less of a game and more of a story that you're kind of following, and you sort of, you're playing along by making the characters do things.
So you're directing the narrative.
Yeah, and you're also making key decisions instead of the characters.
Right.
So it's more akin to a game like Life is Strange or any of the multiple Telltale adventures, which are story-driven rather than gameplay-driven.
Yep.
This one is slightly more ambitious, both in its kind of narrative scope and also in the amount of resources and assets and just all the sheer work that's been put into it. So it's the brainchild of David Cage, who is at Quantic Dream. They've put out a lot of games in this sort of subgenre, most notably on the PlayStation, games like Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls. Before that, they also did games on the PS2, like Fahrenheit and Nomicron or something with David Bowie in it.
Omicron, the Nomad Soul, was the one that had David Bowie in it, and was really his last good game, if you were to ask me.
Okay.
But do go on.
But yes, he very much fancies himself an innovator and an artist. And look, he tackles some heavy themes, and these games won't be for everyone. He does have a little bit of a pretentious voice, it could be argued. David Cage, that is. But anyway, let's get started with Detroit. It's set in 2038. It's in Detroit, and it's kind of a utopian society. Everything's all nice and clean. But the most notable thing is that we've got these androids that are assisting us, and they've been created by the CyberLife Foundation. They're the reasonable price of around $5,000 to $9,000
That's not bad.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good.
especially in 2038 money, right?
Yeah.
You know, inflation's what, 2% a year.
That's like going to Macca's.
That's a damn bargain.
For an AI.
But with this comes the greater question of whether these highly intelligent androids should be given status within the community, because for all intents and purposes, in this world, they are the equivalent of human beings, like intellectually speaking. And so the game tackles questions like, you know, can an AI be as smart as a human? And if so, should they be granted the same rights as a human being? So it's not really new territory. I mean, we've had films, many films in the sci-fi genre tackle these sorts of questions before. And to be honest, it doesn't really break any new ground in that department. But it is still a compelling narrative in itself.
How do you feel about the fact that for a game that doesn't actually want to address issues of, say, race, it's using a lot of the optics of something like the Black Lives Matter movement in order to tell a story about, like, robot slaves being granted emancipation?
Yeah, I did have problems with that.
Yeah.
Like, there is literally a scene in the film where it's... a scene in the game where there's a big gathering of robots and they're protesting, and it's basically robot lives matter. Like,
Yeah.
that's sort of what they're chanting. And it is a little bit insensitive to compare that to issues in the real world, I think.
Yep.
Especially as it doesn't really... It kind of uses it as dressing in a
Yep.
way, you know what I mean?
Yep.
It is a confrontational work that does deal with topics like oppression and discrimination and violence against second-class citizens and things like that. But it's done for dramatic effect without much hard-hitting commentary.
Yeah, and
unfortunately.
it's talking about, like, robots in this case, in this, like, really obvious but also shallow analogy. It feels, I want to say, like, it's a little bit cowardly almost, and as you say, like, hugely insensitive, in that it just refuses to actually acknowledge the things that it is, like, directly drawing on.
There is one point in the narrative where a marginalized character does liken the android's plight with their plight, which I kind of cringed at a little bit.
That's even worse.
It was, yeah, it wasn't done well. But you know what? All that speaking, you sort of have to put it aside, and you do like, and I guess your enjoyment of this game will depend on whether you can sort of get past that,
Yeah.
and also your whether you can get past the level of pretension that the storytelling entails.
Yeah.
But you know what? If you can, it is actually quite a compelling and engaging experience. And, like, yeah, it does sound like these guys are being insensitive. But when you're in the story there, you really do feel for the characters.
Have you had much experience with the way that the game displays the multiple narratives at the end of each scenario?
Yeah.
Have you gone back to try to replay scenes?
I have, yes.
Can you give us an example of, like, maybe one of the, I don't know, like the detective-y scenes or something like that, and how that can branch off? Something early.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Early on in the game, the first scene, you've got Connor,
Yep.
who is an investigative robot that's helping the cops. He's snooping around the apartment. There's a hostage situation on the balcony, but he has a few moments to gather some clues before he goes out there to determine his approach with this android sort of angry guy that's got this child at gunpoint.
Right.
And he's snooping around and he's investigating these crime scenes, which are done in quite a novel way. You can kind of recreate the scene, and you can sort of look around in 3D, sort of rotoscoped, and you can rewind time back and forward.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
And then to look at where all the key items are landing, like the guns or the weapons involved.
Right.
And that's pretty cool. So he finds a gun in his investigations, and you can choose to pick it up or not. And now androids aren't allowed to have guns; it's strictly prohibited. But you can bring one out if you think you'll need it in this negotiation. And yeah, whether you do that or not will be very important, because obviously in that situation you can pull your gun out and you'll have that extra option of threatening the guy.
Right.
But you can also choose to go out without the gun.
What was the way that you went first time around?
I picked up the gun.
Yeah.
But I didn't use it. And I think I resolved the situation to the best of my ability, although...
Kid's dead, right?
Oh, no.
You helped him... you helped the AI throw the kid off the balcony. That's how you resolved that scene in the end.
No. I did save the child, but at the cost of my own android life.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Completely dead.
Yes.
Wow.
But it's not so bad, because the company just sends a new one exactly the same.
So you are Connor too.
Yeah.
So did you replay that?
I did,
And
yes.
Did you try to play in a way where you could save yourself?
Basically, all scenarios, all outcomes are possible there.
Right.
Like you got the really bad outcome, you've got the good outcome where you live,
right?
But the situation's resolved in a different way, and yeah, in that particular scenario, I don't think it has too much of an effect on the plot. But as you get deeper into the story, there are decisions that you'll make. Some of them, which will only, take a split second to make. That will radically change the narratives. And at the end of every chapter, it shows you a branching like graph of your choices, and shows you all of the alternative paths, although they are blacked out.
That's pretty cool. Though,
that is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So previously in Beyond Two Souls, they had a very similar branching system, but it was very much invisible. Like, whatever happens, the game goes forward. Like, you could lose every single cutscene.
Wow.
Every single quick time event, and get hit by a car, but the story just keeps on going. Like, there's no game over state at all. So you can have the worst performance in the world, make all the bad decisions, and even get your main characters killed, but the story will just keep marching on.
Sounds like a weird metaphor for life.
Yeah, but in Beyond Two Souls, it was all behind the scenes. Like, you didn't really know what impact your story decisions were having. You'd kind of just go through the story and you make decisions, but you didn't really know. And there was no like pop-up things like in the Telltale games that tell you whenever you've made a significant choice, for example.
I remember we actually discussed this on air, talking about the fact that as a result of this, there were all these reviews saying how surprisingly linear the game was as a result, and it was only weeks later when people were actually comparing what they thought their linear game experience was and discovering just how much it changed that we became aware of the branching narrative that was on display there. And it's cool, like, this is obviously directly addressing this, and like, I think it's really interesting because you kind of want to make that invisible, right? Like, really, you don't want to be like, hey, these are all the other things you could have done, but you want people to feel like that's there. And there's a part of me that thinks this might be taking it too far, but at the same time, it's actually really, really cool that you can get a sense of what other options you had.
Yeah, and it is also cool, like, it tells you which parts of the story had those different branches. For example, I went through a late game sequence where I was doomed. I was in a sort of, had my back against the wall. They'd gotten me, and I was pretty much, I was toast, and I pretty much just resigned myself to the fact that I was going to die. And I did die, and it was sad and it was terrible. But then upon completion of the chapter, I realized that there were options along the way.
There was a door the whole way.
There was an open door. Yes, there was the gun on the ground.
Should have kept that gun from the kid.
Exactly. Yeah, so it is all out there in the open, all the decision-making things, and I guess that's a good thing. It sort of keeps you intrigued and invested, because otherwise you could just go through the story and you wouldn't even know which ones of your decisions were like, I guess, significant or not.
How does it compare to the other David Cage games? Like, is it just another one of those games, or does it advance that story mechanic in some way?
Mechanically, I think it's the strongest, although it isn't particularly different. The previous two PlayStation games, Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls, they had kind of clunky QuickTime event style sequences where you'd be doing an action on screen, and then you'd get a prompt like to push a random button that correlates with the action. They've kind of streamlined it into a sequence of kind of recognizable inputs now, so that the game has its own language. So that it's mainly like a semi-rotation of the stick, or if you're doing something with both hands, you're pushing both the triggers and things like that. So there is a kind of recognizable rhythm to all of the prompts this time around, which weren't present in the previous games, which is good. However, it does get a little bit finicky. It gets a little bit frustrating and a little bit annoying with all of these different mundane activities that you're forced to do. For example, there's one scene where you're brought home as an android, and your Kara, who is like the servant kind of robot that does cleaning and looks after kids and things like that, and you've just been brought home and you've got to clean like the house. That's your first job, and you actually have to go around and clean the house. So you go over to the dishes and you push square to clean the dishes.
You've got dishes of your own that need cleaning. I've been to your house.
I know. Unfortunately, I can't just push square to clean those.
So they have gone unclean, is what you're saying.
And then you've got to do the vacuuming. You've got to go upstairs and clean the kids' room and things like that. And that's a 15-minute sequence. It just doesn't end.
You're just doing chores.
And there is like a part at the end of the scene where you have to make a very dramatic decision. And I want to go back and see what happens if I choose differently, but I don't want to clean the house again.
Is it?
Do I separate the whites or not?
No, it's toilet paper overhang or underhang.
Oh boy,
that's the important question.
Yeah.
So I am super intrigued to go back and see what I could have done differently. But at the same time, whenever I do, I just get this sort of this feeling like I've done it all before. Like just doing all of these repetitive motions just doesn't appeal to me. So what I did is I resorted to YouTube to get all the goodies. And I don't know if that's how I would recommend you do it, because it does sort of shorten the lifespan of the game. But for the purposes of reviewing the game, I wanted to sort of get those experiences. But I think if you put the game down, wait 6 months and come back to it, and then have a different experience, I think that's the way to do it. Is play the game organically, come back,
have a longevity,
have
with
a long break
Yeah.
from the story, and then once all the finer details of the game have sort of washed away, go back and make some different choices and see what happens. And yeah, look, I was on board with most of the characters' story arcs for most of the game. I was rooting for the main characters, especially Connor and the police guy. They've got kind of this buddy cop going on, where it's this old grizzled police veteran who's basically his life is hell, and he's checked out of life. Is joined by Connor, who's the android from Cyberlife, who's assisting with the investigation into all these deviant androids that are kind of going around and doing their own thing, and it's all dangerous. But he's so endearing in his dedication to the investigation. Well, he does get a little bit scarily involved, scarily dedicated to the investigation at times, but it makes for a very cool good cop, bad cop thing. And that was the story that really
So they
hooked
got
me.
a really good dynamic.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's actually really funny. watching them play off each other at crime scenes, and this guy just hates androids. Like he just doesn't have the time of day for androids, but he's got this perky, like really enthusiastic android in his grill, trying to like get him off his chair and do all this stuff. And for me, that was by far the best story of the three.
So between the heavy themes and the chores around the house, is this game fun?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not. Well, actually, no. That's not a good word for it.
Or is it
I will
meant to
say
be?
it's engaging. It's compelling, and you will feel for the characters if you play through. You're with them every step of the way. I mean, you're there cleaning the house, for Christ's sake. After you do that, you've got to be on board with these characters' journeys, right? You cleaned up that house.
Sounds like you're very emotionally invested.
Yeah. Yeah, fun. Is not the key adjective I'd use to describe it. But it is very dramatic, and depending on your decisions, like there's no like real limit to how bad things can get. That's what I'll say.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Like there are good endings.
Positive.
There are good things that happen, but boy, this game can just go off the rails in such a bad way. And when it does, it's a bit of a gut punch.
Yeah, I was about to say that sounds a little gut wrenching.
Yeah. I don't want to spoil too much. But basically, on my first playthrough, like my organic playthrough, where I just like made all of my gut instinct decisions, it just ended terribly. I left the world a much, much worse place, and basically almost everyone was dead, and the one person that was alive was heavily compromised.
Oh no!
Oh boy!
To put it mildly.
So you've learned something about your own instincts, right?
Yeah. So kind of after I finished the game for the first time, I just sat there. I couldn't really do anything but process the experience, and I was bummed out. Really bummed out. Because after this 12, 14-hour journey, I just had this really bleak, depressing ending. And I thought, I don't really want to play again, but I can't leave it at that. I've got to go back and explore what could have happened. Hopefully
But that in
happier.
itself can be a sign of a really good game.
I think so. Yeah. Look, it made me think a little bit. It is basically a game about oppression and discrimination. And even though it is sort of told in a bit of a ham-fisted way, some of the themes really did resonate with me.
Cool.
We've been talking about Detroit Being Human, which is a PS4 exclusive. That's going to bring us to the end of this week's episode of Z Games. Thanks so much for tuning in. Catch you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.